Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today the trade deadline has come and gone. So we got to talk winners and losers of the NHL trade deadline. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Make sure you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports, and comment down below with you what you thought of the trade deadline this year. How did your favorite team do this year? Did you like their moves? Did you dislike your moves? Let us know in the comment section below. We can even join the conversation as well. Drop a like if you like our content as well, and hit the bell notifications so that way you guys know when our content goes live. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how you doing today?
Doing well. And it was a very interesting trade deadline. There was some stuff that we sort of knew was going to happen, and there was some other stuff that came way out of left field, way out of left field.
Yeah, there was definitely some surprises that came through at the deadline. For instance, I didn't anticipate really Buffalo making any kind of drastic moves at the deadline. I thought they were really kind of stand pat with what they did. And they made a pretty surprising move, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. Now, we could go over every single trade today, like every minor, major, big time move. But I think instead of that, I can recommend a page so that way you can actually go and take a look at these. If you go to tsn.com and you go to their trade center, there's an entire trade tracker to look at the different moves that have been made over this deadline. They're also, for the most part, interactive. That gives you the story on how these deals came to be. If you want to know a little bit more, for instance, on how Brandon Carlo went to the Toronto Maple Leafs from the Boston Bruins, you can click on that trade and you can find more about that deal. We are not going to watch that video because we're
going to get in trouble.
Whole can of worms. Exactly. So if you want to go there, check out TSN's trade center. I highly recommend it. I think they do a great job. But there were some major moves that happened. Just to name a few, like I just mentioned, Brandon Carlo going to the Toronto Maple Leafs from the Boston Bruins. Brad Marchand going from the Boston Bruins to the Florida Panthers, a team I really didn't think was really that heavily in on Brad Marchand. That was another major move that was made. Mikko Rantanen making now playing for his third team this season, going to the Dallas Stars from the Carolina Hurricane. We're going to be dissecting that quite a bit. The Toronto Maple Leafs also loading up, getting Scott Laughton from the Philadelphia Flyers. I mentioned before a Buffalo trade that I was kind of surprised it was made. Making a big splash with the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa Senators getting Dylan Cousins and Dennis Gilbert and a second-round pick for Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker. Really surprising move to me, honestly. Other moves that were made, Jake Wallman got traded from the San Jose Sharks to the Edmonton Oilers. Brock Nelson got dealt from the Islanders to the Colorado Avalanche. Riley Smith, originally playing for the New York Rangers, got dealt back to the Vegas Golden Knights. Nice little reunion there for the Vegas Golden Knights. Prior to the deadline, Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde getting traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning from the Seattle Kraken. Yanni Gourde making his return to the Tampa Bay Lightning in that deal. Trent Frederick getting dealt from Boston Bruins to the Edmonton Oilers. So the Edmonton Oilers were certainly loading up. And probably one of my favorite deals of this past deadline that came well before the deadline, Seth Jones being dealt to the Florida Panthers from the Chicago Blackhawks for Spencer Knight and a conditional 2026 first-round pick. Really love that deal for both sides, for Chicago, for Florida. Chicago getting their future number one goaltender for years to come, potentially, and for Florida getting a reliable defenseman on the back end in the top four, especially with the news of Aaron Ekblad getting suspended 20 games coming down yesterday. Something that we can dissect in a separate video in a separate time. But a lot of trades that happened throughout this deadline. So let's first talk about the winners. Tom, I'm going to let you start on this one. Which teams do you feel like came out so much better because of this trade deadline?
Well, it's interesting you bring it up because, there's two obvious ones here. And let's not beat around the bush. Your two obvious ones here are the Dallas Stars and the Florida Panthers. But I say that with kind of a caveat or asterisk or however you want to put it. Now, Florida, defending Stanley Cup champions, they're going to try to win it again, as you probably should when you're a defending Stanley Cup champion. So what do? You go and you LTIR Matthew Tkachuk because he's hurt, and that's all good and fine. You bring in Seth Jones to bolster your D. Good move. Seth Jones, I've never been against Seth Jones. I've just never thought that. I always thought he was a little bit overrated, but still, it's still a good trade. It's still a good trade. And from what it seems like, Chicago is very happy with the trade too with Spencer Knight, as they think he's a huge part of their future in Chicago, and good for them. You shocked the world. And I was in Boston on Friday dealing with some stuff, just doing some personal stuff up there when it happened. And I felt like the whole area was in shock when they found out that Brad Marchand, who probably everyone thought would have been a lifetime Bruin, maybe considered one of the Bruins ever, is now going to their mortal enemy. Team that's knocked them out of the playoffs the last few years. The team that ruined what should have been the greatest season in NHL history 2 years ago. Now, if you can't beat him, he's joining them. And I'll talk about the Bruins a little bit later, what they're doing, but that's besides my point. So Brad Marchand and Seth Jones are both going to Florida. Marchand's not going to play to start, and Matthew Tkachuk's on IR. Now, let's go back in time about a year. Where have we heard this story before? I seemingly remember a team who was a defending Stanley Cup champion who LTIR'd one of their top players to bring somebody else in who was also hurt. You may have heard of this team. It's called the Vegas Golden Knights. And remember, they did it last year. They brought in Thomas Hertl and LTIR Mark Stone, and neither of them really played until the playoffs. Now, I know Paul Maurice has said he wants to have both of them back before the playoffs, especially Marchand, to get this groove in there. But it's funny you bring it up now, because if we look at the standings, they are on a collision course right now with another team who I say wasn't one of the obvious ones, but another team who is probably chomping at the bit to get at them. And that team is the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're far enough back right now. They're 5 points back. Florida's in first. You figure Tampa will probably beat Toronto in the first round because it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about them later too. But now they're chomping at the bit. The Tampa Bay Lightning are chomping at the bit to get at the Panthers, who are doing the same thing the Vegas Golden Knights did last year. And the Dallas Stars were chomping at the bit to get at them. Now let's get into what Tampa did. You brought home Yanni Gourde, was a huge part of your back-to-back Stanley Cup winning teams. And you also brought in Oliver Bjorkstrand, who fills in nicely on that third line. You also had Brandon Hagel, who's playing a lot better than I thought he was this year, on their second line, and you have your best players on your first line, which I never liked, but regardless, they went and did it. It's going to be interesting to see if Tampa and Florida meet. And in my mind, as much as Florida went and did, and as hard as they went to make their team better, part of me says if they see Tampa, I might lean towards Tampa right now. And Tampa's a winner too, bringing in Yanni Gourde and Borkstrand. Say what you will, I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning might be my favorite to come out of the East, just because they made some small moves, but they bolstered their team up, and they have the best coach in the world right now behind the bench. I love them bringing Yanni Gourde back. I love them bringing in Oliver Bjorkstrand to play on the third line. I think Tampa, and with all those players playing together, I think that if they see Florida in the playoffs, they can beat them. So let's go to another small winner here, and that's the team in the same division, the Toronto Maple Leafs. You brought in Brandon Carlo. It was a nice trade. Carlo's been a stalwart for the Bruins for many, many years. You brought him in for Fraser Minton and some draft picks. Good pickup for the Leafs. I don't know if it's going to help them enough. If the Leafs win the division, it might win them around. If the Leafs don't win the division, it might be SOS or SSDD up in Toronto. We have to see. If I were the Leafs right now, I would have my sights set on trying to win that Atlantic division to avoid Florida and Tampa in the first round and let them beat the ever-living you-know-what out of each other in round one so you can avoid them potentially get a banged-up team in the second round. that I don't know if they can even beat regardless. So let's go to another obvious winner here. And you know them, you love them. It's the Dallas Stars, a team with depth that just got even better. You brought in Mikko Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen's a funny one. I don't think he ever wanted to leave Colorado. I really don't think so. He got to Carolina. He said what he said, that there are 4 teams I'm looking to play for. He told Brendan Moore, and your team is not one of them. On top of which, we have heard things come out this year from anonymous player polls that the Tom Dundon is one of the worst owners in the league. He doesn't treat his players very well. He doesn't give them any perks. The facilities in Carolina are terrible. The arena's becoming run down. The practice facility is not very good. And the accommodations for away teams are of some of the worst in the league. So maybe you can understand why Rantanen wanted out of there. So Rantanen goes to Dallas. He makes Dallas better. Let's not beat around the bush. He makes Dallas better. To say he doesn't is ridiculous. Dallas also has Tyler Seguin on IR and Miro Heiskanen on IR. Rupe Hintz is also day-to-day. So Dallas got better. Let's just put it that way. They added another elite player to a plethora of elite players. Here's the thing with Dallas. Rupe Hintz is a great center. He's just below a point per game this year, 52 points in 59 games. But what has been Dallas's kryptonite over the past couple of years? Teams with that big, heavy, elite center beating them. And I don't know if Mikko Rantanen is going to solve that problem if they run into an Edmonton or a Vegas again. They obviously beat Vegas last year, but the last 2 years in the conference finals, they lost to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl of the Oilers, and then Jack Eichel the year before with Vegas, who are these elite, big-time centers who teams are built around, who carry their teams. It's not a knock on Rupe Hintz. It's not a knock, on Wyatt Johnson. Those guys are just not as good as Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid. And as good as Rantanen is, does this put Dallas over the top for the cup? Well, we have to see what happens with Dallas. We really do. Right now, Dallas is in second place. They're staring down Colorado, who I'll get into later, who has basically improved that part of their team immensely. They have. But could Dallas, and I hate to use a comparison, could they be a comparison to my favorite team, the Rangers, from 10 years ago? Always had good wingers, good goaltending, solid committee on D, but never had that game-breaking center. And could Dallas run into the same issues the Rangers used to run in way back when? Dallas doesn't have that center. Does Dallas have that game breaker? Does Dallas have somebody who can put that team on their back? Now, they're good all around, but can they have that guy that when things are tight can put that team on their back and win them a game? And as good as Rantanen is, I don't know if that's the answer for Dallas, and that's why I don't know if this trade equals Stanley Cup for the Stars. I really don't know. But let's go to another team, and this will be one of my last trade deadline winners right now, the Colorado Avalanche. Yet again, they didn't make any groundbreaking, oh my God, big, huge moves. Oh my God, this guy's going to Colorado. Oh my God, that guy's going to Colorado. Most likely because they already won the trade that they needed to win. Everybody in Colorado was saying, oh my God, we're going to get burned on this trade. Martin Necas has been nothing short of amazing for the Avs. He's been nothing short of amazing for the Avalanche so far. And we talked about that trade a little earlier episodes, obviously, but he has been great for Colorado. He's an elite winger. He stepped in and replaced Rantanen with seemingly no problems. 6 goals, 11 assists, 17 points in 16 games. You can't ask for much more than when Necas is giving them. But what you went and did is you got 2 solid depth pieces. And Brock Nelson, who was a top-line guy with the Islanders, but let's just face it, the Islanders aren't going really much anywhere. And Charlie Coyle, who was a solid middle six guy with the Bruins for all those years on those great Bruins teams. Colorado's biggest issue over the years has been they never replaced Nazem Kadri after they won that cup. I don't know if Brock Nelson is an equal replacement, but it's better than anything that they've had. On top of which, it's looking like Gabe Landeskog may be ready to go for the playoffs finally. So Colorado, they finally addressed their issues down the middle. I really, really like what they did. Also bringing in Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey was another huge one from the Rangers. The Rangers had to get rid of them. They weren't going to re-sign them. Lindgren is a second-pair defenseman with Josh Manson, okay? And you have Jimmy Vesey, who's probably going to be in and out of the lineup. So I really, really like what Colorado did, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they do play Dallas this year in the playoffs. what may happen, because Colorado now has those centers and they still have that game breaker in Nathan McKinnon. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here if Dallas and Colorado do indeed square off, because let's just say Colorado has Dallas fresh in their minds after last year. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, really good assessment there, Tom. I'm going to stick here on Colorado and just take a look right now at Daily Faceoff, like looking at what some of these lines look like currently for the Colorado Avalanche, who I agree, I think are a winner. But like, think about how you fortify that center position behind Nathan McKinnon on line 2, 3, and 4 for the remainder of this year. You get Brock Nelson on the second line, centering between Jonathan Drouin and Valeri Nichushkin. You've got Charlie Coyle, who is just consistent, who was playing center on the second line for Boston, now playing third line center between Joel Kiviranta and Ross Colton. And then you got Jack Drury, who they also picked up in the Mikko Rantanen deal, centering between Parker Kelly and Logan O'Connor. They did a great job with this deadline overall, even in the month that preceded as well. Plus, you add in the fact that they also picked up Martin Necas, who I really thought Carolina was foolish for trading in general, because he was a player that gave that team identity. I really do like overall what Colorado has done in this trade deadline. They also picked up Eric Johnson, who has not drawn into the lineup just yet, as we can see for Daily Faceoff. But we do see that Ryan Lindgren's making an immediate impact on that second pairing off with Josh Manson. If I had to guess, if Eric Johnson does draw in, maybe Sam Malinsky comes out here and there for Eric Johnson on the right-hand side to side along with Samuel Girard. But overall, I really, really like this Colorado team all of a sudden. Looking at the Dallas Stars, who I think are another winner, picking up Mikko Rantanen was huge. And then extending him to the deal that he got, where I ultimately think Colorado could have gotten him for the same deal, which is a discussion in a little bit for when we talk about losers of the trade deadline, because even though Colorado was a winner, there's one place where they lose, and I'll get to that in a little bit when I talk about that. I think picking up Mikko Rantanen and only having to realistically give up from your lineup Logan Stankoven, who was already going to have a rough time trying to find a place in this lineup that already sports Mikhail Granlund, Evgeny Dadonov, and Colin Blackwell, like on the right-hand side. I think it was going to be tough to keep Logan Stankoven around, but they did a great job making sure they didn't give up Maverick Bourque in this deal, because that was some rumors going back and forth that if Dallas was going to make this move, they were going to have to give up both Logan Stankoven and Maverick Bourque. So only giving up one of them, I think, is a huge win for Dallas, but then also getting your, right wing one for 8 years going forward, I think is awesome. And then you also have Wyatt Johnston centering between them alongside Jason Robertson. That is a very strong line overall for Dallas. Looking at other winners here that I wanted to mention, the Florida Panthers. Now, there's really not much to look at the lineup right now without Matt Tkachuk and Brad Marchand in the lineup, but you can honestly gather that both of these guys are going to factor on that second line. Mackie Samoskevich and Evan Rodriguez are going to have to move down in the lineup. If I had to guess of who comes out of this lineup right now, I would think it's AJ Greer and Thomas Nosek.
And you dropped those guys to line 4?
Huh?
I would assume you dropped the guys on the second line to line 4, or dropped the guys on the third line to line 4?
Probably. Mackie Samoskevich and Evan Rodriguez would make a lot of sense down on the fourth line. It's just, turn and burn guys to, play with Nico Sturman between them. Another guy that could be a possibility of coming out of the lineup, although I don't know, just because he's played so strong as of late, is Jesper Boqvist. I don't see him coming out of the lineup because I think his chemistry with Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen has been very good, which is even why we're considering moving Mackie Samoskevich and Evan Rodriguez down all the way to the fourth line in this particular lineup jumble. But Brad Marchand and Matt Tkachuk almost certainly factor to play on that second line with Sam Bennett centering them, which I think for any playoff team is a nightmare scenario for teams looking down the barrel at it. You come at any playoff team with that second line of Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and Matt Tkachuk, you are in to get your teeth kicked in, like bar none, which is why I think, looking at a team that could end up facing him in the first round, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who is another winner here, I think that this is a formidable foe. You look at that third line now, adding Yanni Gordon, Oliver Bjorkstrand in, and I think for Tampa, we almost have this resurgence of that third line that was so special in 2021 and 2020, in 2020 and 2021, I'll say. Yeah, like 2020 and 2021, when they had Blake Coleman and Yanni Gord playing on that line. That was, as well as, I believe, Barclay Goodrow, right? Yep. Special line overall, like really, really special. And I think we're going to get almost a renaissance of that, if you will. Just replace Barclay Goodrow with Oliver Bjorkstrand on this line, honestly. Tampa, I think, has a sneaky good lineup going into the playoffs. And Andrei Vasilevsky has also played really strong hockey as of late. Another team that I felt was a trade deadline winner, if you will, and it might not seem that big, but the Winnipeg Jets. Brandon Tanev, adding that to the fourth line, adding Brandon Tanev to your fourth line, I think is a bigger move than a lot of people realize. When you have teams that are in President's Trophy position, the smaller moves that they make become larger moves when you realize that they are only like a few small pieces away from real true contention. And I think Brandon Tanev helps bring the Winnipeg Jets that much closer to a trip to the dance.
Division's tough though. That second round for them, if they get there, is going to be very difficult.
Very difficult. And they better hope that Connor Hellebuck isn't running to the ground at that point.
Yeah.
Another addition that I also liked as well, even though I also really liked it for Pittsburgh, was Luke Schenn, who Pittsburgh flipped after acquiring him in the first place and got a second round pick out of that. I thought that was some really savvy dealing by Kyle Dubas. Really smart trade. But an even smarter trade for Winnipeg, picking up Luke Schenn for that third pairing to pair off with Hayden Fleury, at least for right now. Defense is actually sneakily strong for Winnipeg. The argument could be made that Winnipeg could easily get to the Western Conference final, but they're going to have a major roadblock in front because the Western Conference is a lot stronger than people realize.
Like I'm saying, as good as they are, they're big. They're a big team, and don't get me wrong. But are they a fast team? They run into a team. Colorado blew them off the ice last year in round one when everybody, including myself, thought that Winnipeg would walk out of that series with no problem.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, look, we've seen this story before with Winnipeg where they get far along, they get to the end of the season, they get to the playoffs, and they just run out of gas right at the end. I'd like to think that this year's a little bit different because it feels like Connor Hellebuck is playing on another level right now.
I'm giving him a round this year. I'll give him a round, but I just don't know if that team can skate with the personnel that Colorado or Dallas have. Goaltending wise, I'd say they're definitely got the nod against Colorado. Against Dallas, it's a little closer.
Yeah, I think for Colorado, they certainly do have a relatively stronger pairing now in net with Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood. But when you compare to Dallas on one side with Jake Ottinger and Casey DeSmith, and on the other side with Winnipeg with Connor Hellebuck and Eric Comrie, I give the benefit of the doubt to Winnipeg and Dallas. I think those goaltending tandems are a lot stronger, and it makes it a lot stronger when you have guys like Jake Ottinger as your 1A and Connor Hellebuck as your 1A. Mackenzie Blackwood is good. I wouldn't say great just yet. I think he has a ton of potential, and I think he's on the right track finally, being in Colorado when originally being in New Jersey and San Jose with no defense in front of him when he played in both of those locations. I think he's actually got steady defense now. So Mackenzie Blackwood could honestly blossom into a very strong goaltender in the West. Discussions for a different time, though. Lastly, the last team I want to mention here as a deadline winner is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and adding Scott Laughton to that center depth, I
I
think is
forgot
great.
all about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a smaller move that was made, but when you look under the microscope at how uh, crazy uh, the center market was this year, you had guys commanding first round picks that in other years otherwise probably wouldn't have. Like Scott Laughton is probably not worth a first round pick, but this year he was. Yanni Gourde is probably not worth a first round pick, but this year he was. Hence why a team like the New Jersey Devils, when all of a sudden 48 hours before the deadline, Jack Hughes needs shoulder reconstructive surgery and is going to be out till September, why it felt like New Jersey kind of sat on their hands and only picked up Cody Glass at center. But it's not about not trying to pick somebody up. It's more so not having to spend the premium price to do so and understanding that you're only just kind of delaying the inevitable of getting eliminated in the playoffs when you don't have your best player and your main focal point of your offense. Mm-hmm. So that's why like New Jersey isn't a loser to me. They're also not a winner because you know what? Tom Fitzgerald did what he could only do. But with Toronto, picking up Scott Laughton is a great move for them because you get a strong center to play behind Austin Matthews and John Tavares, and you have him centering between Bobby McMahon and Max Domi. I think that's a really strong third line for Toronto, and I think Toronto, with that move, has possibly bought them around as well. Brandon Carlo.
They need to win the division. They need to win the division.
They do.
And honestly, it depends who they play, too. If they play Ottawa, karma's the other way around because the Leafs always beat the Sens in the playoffs no matter what.
If the playoffs started today, Toronto would be playing New Jersey. So
no, actually they wouldn't. Hold on. They
last I checked, it was at least over the weekend. That's what it was.
No, they'd be playing Tampa. They'd be playing Tampa, and I don't give. I say it goes 6 games, but I don't give Toronto that series.
Yeah, I don't think I give it to. I don't think I give it to Toronto either. Honestly, like even if they played New Jersey at the current state that they're at, I think New Jersey's goaltending and defense is better.
My Ranger, if my Rangers got in, I'd take my chances with the Leafs.
It kind of spells out what we think of this current Toronto team. Look, there's no doubt about it. Toronto is a far better team than they have been in the past. They've addressed, some very specific needs that they've had. Addressing the defense, picking up Brandon Carlo. They picked up Chris Tanev before the season, but Chris Tanev is currently on IR. But I just still don't see this Toronto team as super strong. That being said, I still really like the moves to pick up Brandon Carlo. I like the move to pick up Scott Laughton. It gets you that much closer to, real contention. But Tom's absolutely right. They need to win that Atlantic Division. But teams like Boston getting a little bit weaker, I think only helps them. So let's actually segue and talk about some losers here. Because in my mind, and you might disagree, I think Boston's a slight loser here. But I'll talk about why they might also be a winner in the long run. But Tom, I'll let you start here. Deadline losers, who you got?
I mean, the obvious elephant in the room here is Carolina. But the sheer fact of the matter is that Rantanen did not want to be there. He did not want to be there. I don't know why, if he didn't want to be there, that he would have accepted the trade. I don't know why they would have tried to trade for him if he knew he wasn't going to sign for them. The trade makes no sense. So you gave up Marty Necas, one of your best players, to basically bring in Taylor Hall and Logan Stankov, and it doesn't make sense. And I already mentioned about what's the stuff that's going around the Hurricanes. The only thing the Hurricanes do have right now is they probably have a cushion in the Metro that they're definitely going to get home ice. They're going to probably slide into that second spot and definitely have home ice for a round. Whether they get out of that round is anybody's guess. But yeah, you brought in a guy who you thought was going to bolster your team, and yet again, you get burned. You got burned with Gensel last year, and now you're getting burnt. You got, at least Gensel played in the playoffs for you guys and played pretty well. Rantanen didn't even play a playoff game. He was there. It's similar to in baseball when Mike Piazza played for the Florida Marlins. He was there for like 3 minutes and then gone. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand what the onus with Carolina was in giving up all of these players to try and bring in a superstar who never wanted to be there, in the first place. And the thing with Carolina is, with all that's coming out about them, I look at the Canes. The Canes don't look like a cup favorite to me. I don't even think the Canes will get out of the East. The Canes maybe will win a round, depending on who they play. Maybe they'll win two, depending on how they play. They're not getting out of the East. And if they get to the finals, they're not winning a cup. So the Canes basically went backwards. They went nowhere. Their tires in the mud. They are. Now, you brought up the Bruins before. Throughout the history of the Boston Bruins, there are certain times where it just gets down to where they say they've had certain players there for many, many years. And it happened with Phil Esposito. It happened with Bobby Orr. It happened with Ray Bourque. It even happened with Chara, where they get to a point and they say, okay, you're a little too old. For what you want to do, you're a little too old for us. And I think that's what happened with Marchand. He wanted a little more money. They didn't want to pay him for it. And let's just be real, guys. The Boston Bruins, as good as they've been and as great as a history they have, they're generally not the biggest spenders on the market. And they're generally not a team who's going to make a big, big splash to bring a marquee player in. They're a team, they draft their best players generally, and they bring them through the system. And guys who they trade for and sign are guys who are kind of support guys. So I just think with Marchand, they made the age-old Boston Bruin decision saying, you've gotten a little too long in the tooth. What you want to be paid is not what we're looking to afford. And maybe, just maybe, we're looking to hand the team over now to David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy. I think McAvoy will be wearing the C next year in Marchand's absence. Now, Marchand kind of said something a little cryptic saying, well, what do you think about the Bruins? He goes, well, we'll see what happens over the summer. Is he hinting at maybe going back there in the summer? I really don't think so. Does he stay in Florida over the summer? I'm going to be blunt here. I really don't think so either. I don't think he's staying with the Panthers either. Where he goes, anybody's guess. But yeah, Marchand, I think, is a pure rental. At the same time, I just think the Bruins knew that they were teetering on the playoff bubble. They knew that if they got there, they probably wouldn't win a round. So sometimes when you get to that point, you got to pull the plug. And I'll tell you what, I would expect the Bruins to be back in the mix fairly soon, because that's just the history of the Bruins. When they go down for a year or two, and then they're right back in the mix a couple years later. So I think it's just they're wanting to put the team on the backs of David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy. And I think just having Marchand out of there is what needed to be done for them. So I don't consider them a loser. I just think that they ultimately decided we've tried this a bunch of years in the past. It's time to start going a different direction.
I'll say this with Boston, which we'll take a look a little bit at a lineup or two real quick. Like with Boston, the problems were there since the beginning of the season. Like, it's obvious that this team, their center depth was nothing without Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. And losing both of them was a huge blow to this team. First of all, I liked the Charlie Coyle deal for the sole reason that they got Casey Middlestat out of that deal. I think Casey Middlestat now becomes a building block for a future decent Boston team. But I can't help but feel like that they should have started, making some blow up type moves last year, that they should have really committed to making some of these moves over the summer this past year.
I'm going to say, if you're going to do it during the season last year, remember they were in first place in the Atlantic Division.
No, and I agree. Like they should have been buyers last year, no doubt. But then buying in the offseason for Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, I thought was reckless. And ultimately, two moves that I thought that really cost Boston in the end. And one of the main reasons why they needed to break things down right now, because it only delayed the inevitable for them. I thought that they should have made it maybe one or two smaller moves this past offseason to kind of get themselves a little bit more refreshed. I thought going all in on Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov at the time, I was optimistic, but I just really thought that just not the moves that they needed to make. I mean, look at Nashville and how bad right now some of the moves that they made in the offseason has really set them back all of a sudden, just because they haven't been able to keep up. Same here. Regardless, this is your Boston Bruins team right now. You can definitely see uh, the holes that have been created with no Brad Marchand, no Trent Frederick, which also honorable mention I meant to mention before.
Forgot about him. Yeah.
The Edmonton Oilers and the moves that they made, I really liked. Uh, Trent Frederick's not in the lineup right now. He's on IR for the Oilers, but I liked the moves that they made also. So honorable mention to them here, just because I didn't get to mention. Another honorable mention, honestly, is Chicago. Just because I liked some of the smaller moves that they made. Spencer Knight, I talked about that. Joe Veleno, maybe getting a fresh, scenery, if you will, going over to Chicago, I think is a nice move for them as well. I think it'll be a nice move for down the line for them. Let's look at the Carolina Hurricanes here, who are another loser in this sense. This team really lost some identity with the Martin Necas deal and dealing him away from Mikko Rantanen. Now, I mean, if anything's to be believed on the Mikko Rantanen front, he told Rod Brindamore that there are 4 teams I will play for, and you are not one of them. But I feel like there needed to be a conversation beforehand with him if you were going to make this deal. And that, in question goes as a failing to me for Colorado. Because this whole trade situation only comes about because Colorado wasn't transparent with Mikko Rantanen beforehand. And I don't feel like Colorado made the best effort that they possibly could have to re-sign Mikko Rantanen, because I think Mikko Rantanen would have agreed to an 8-year, $12 million deal, an 8x12 with Colorado. Hell, I think he would have ended up going for an 8x10 or an 8x11 with Colorado to stay and give him a hometown discount. It seemed like Mikko Rantanen really did love playing for the Colorado Avalanche, and he wanted to be a lifer in Colorado. But that trade that sent him away to Carolina, I thought was reckless for Colorado, but it was high risk, high reward, and it rewarded them handsomely by giving them Jack Drury and Martin Necas. So it worked out for them. For Carolina, it was just flat reckless, trading away 2 of your franchise cornerstones in Martin Necas, who is probably the bigger of the 2, and Jack Drury, who admittedly not that big a franchise cornerstone, but for Carolina, you had to go and pick up Mark Jankowski at the deadline to replace him. So not a great move by Carolina. Now, you tried to redeem it a little bit by picking up Logan Stankoven for Dallas, which I do like that move. I like that move for Carolina in the long run. I think Logan Stankoven, with the change of scenery, is going to do some really nice things in Carolina, especially getting the chance to play top 6 minutes in Carolina. But it doesn't excuse the fact that you traded away Martin Necas and Jack Drury for 13 games of Mikko Rantanen, and Mikko Rantanen at that point phoning it in for the Carolina Hurricanes. Not even playing as hard as he could, it looked like most nights.
He just looked like he didn't want to. I was watching their game against the Red Wings last Tuesday night. The Red Wings announcers, Ken Daniels and Mickey Redmond, were saying the same thing. They said he just looks like he doesn't want to be out there.
Yeah. And it showed. And he didn't want to be out there. Dallas picking up Rantanen is a far better move than Carolina picking up Mikko Rantanen. And I think this is going to be a move that really hurts Carolina in the long run. This Mikko Rantanen deal is really going to hurt them in the long run. I thought cutting your losses when you could and getting first-round picks and Logan Stankoven, I think, will ultimately help them. And maybe in a few years, we can talk about how this actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise for them and actually really, really help them.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that either. I think, like I said, I think the team who's going to make out the best in this whole thing is Colorado.
Yeah.
You got Marty Necas and you improved your center depth. I don't know if it's going to equal another Stanley Cup for Colorado. I don't think there is a cup favorite this year, by the way.
No,
I think Colorado is definitely one of the top teams. It could be considered a favorite, not the favorite, because there is not the favorite this year.
Yeah, overall. Now, I want to mention a few teams that I'm more so just kind of like, okay, those are moves that happened, but kind of questioning, like, why they even happened. Ottawa. This one left me kind of scratching my head a little bit. I like the move to pick up Dylan Cousins, but what was wrong with Josh Norris? In my mind,
and it upset Brady Tkachuk. So, Brady, if you want to leave this summer, I know a team will be glad to take you.
Yeah, no, New Jersey's actually a great place, and it's Taylor ham, not pork roll. But
yeah, I don't know. Him and JT Miller lining up together would look very nice.
It's like I told you a few weeks ago. You got Brady Tkachuk at home. His name is JT Miller. But
well, it'd be nice to have two, but if it ain't him, well, we'll talk about this other team I want to talk about in the middle, but go on in a little while.
Greedy. But I definitely was kind of scratching my head of like, I always heard the rumblings that Buffalo might trade Dylan Cousins, but I didn't think that Ottawa was going to be the match. I don't know. I feel like they gave up too much to get Dylan Cousins. I think he's a guy with a ton of potential, and I think playing alongside Drake Batherson and David Perron, I think is going to be great for the remainder of this year. But it came at the expense of pissing off Brady Tkachuk, and you're trying to keep him around for the long haul, and I don't think that helps your case. The move I did like, though, was picking up Fabian Zetterlund for the bottom six, because he provides scoring depth for that bottom six. He has, I believe, 15 goals this year so far, I believe. Which for a bottom six player, he was playing top 6 minutes for the San Jose Sharks, but playing in the bottom six for Ottawa, I think is going to be a really nice fit for Fabian Zetterlund here. But again, just move the Dylan Cousins move just had me like, huh? Buffalo Sabres too. It's just like, okay, you traded Dylan Cousins and you got Josh Norris, which is great, but you also pick up, I believe at the moment, an injured Jacob Bernard Docker, who you're not going to get back until next year. So it's certainly a move for your future. But I'm still wondering, it's like, okay, you dealt Dylan Cousins, but why not at that point also trade Jason Zucker? Why not move on from Ryan McLeod? Why not trade JJ Peterka? Why was your only move realistically Dylan Cousins? Like, that really kind of confused me. It's like, if you're going to trade one, you should trade a few guys, stack up some futures, and really try to improve in the offseason, try to sign some, high profile guys if possible, really try to sell Buffalo to some of these free agents. Like, you want to make a name for yourself and like sign Brad Marchand for a year, convince him to keep playing on the East Coast, but play in Buffalo on a growing
I
team.
think Brad Marchand's going to want to play for a team that's got a Stanley Cup on their mind.
Yeah, that's why honestly, like if he's going for an East Coast team, I think he's better suited looking at teams in the tri-state area right now. Looking at
I'll gladly take another one. I'll gladly take on the Rangers next year too.
Yeah, like looking at New Jersey, looking at New York, I think could be both very good.
Honestly, for him. If you were to ask me if they have the money, he's going to join his provincial mate McKinnon in Colorado next year. If he goes
think it's
anywhere.
Possible too. I think Colorado has another big name on their mind in the offseason, though, and we'll get to that at a different time. But overall with Buffalo, I'm left a little bit confused of why only Dylan Cousins, but you know what? I really like the move to pick up Josh Norris for your future. That, and he's under contract for the next 6 years after this. So good on you. Yay. Another team I was kind of left kind of confused by of like, why didn't you do more was Detroit. And I felt like Detroit needed to make at least 1 or 2 moves to try to improve this lineup just slightly, because this is a decent lineup and it's, they've been playing a lot better as of late, but I think that they needed a jolt by picking up somebody like another player or two. Picking up Craig Smith in the Joe Veleno trade, I thought was really it's a nice pickup, but I thought you could have done a little bit more. I think doing more to try to fortify this lineup and help your team out a little bit more would have been nice. Picking up Peter Mrazek to back up Cam Talbot was decent as well, but like I feel like they could have done more for the bottom 6.
They were teetering Detroit, and I think Detroit's come to the conclusion now where they don't think that they're probably on the other side of the playoff line and saying they don't think they're going to make it by not doing nothing.
Yeah, and the last team I was just more so kind of left confused a little bit by was the Nashville Predators. And I think I understand what happened here with the Nashville Predators. They needed to sell off a few of these pieces to try to make the best of it for the remainder of this year and what has been a hellacious year for the Nashville Predators and for Barry Trotz. I think I understand what happened, though. I think in this particular scenario, their asking price was way too high on some guys. I
Yeah.
think their asking price on Ryan O'Reilly, because we had heard the rumors that New Jersey was in heavily on Ryan O'Reilly. I think that Nashville saw the market on centers and we're asking for the moon for Ryan O'Reilly. I mean, Mark Jankowski ended up getting, I think, a third or a second round pick this year. And he's a guy otherwise I think is only worth like a fourth or fifth round pick, honestly. Um, so they were probably asking for quite a bit for Ryan O'Reilly. They were probably asking for a prospect and a high pick, which is rich at the moment for another year of team control for him. They were probably also asking for a lot for Steven Stamkos for guys that were kicking the tires on him. Same for Jonathan Marchessault, who was also recently signed in the offseason.
And that's who they probably should have traded because Marchessault's voiced his displeasure with them all year. Stamkos has kind of been ho-hum, but not Marchessault.
Yeah, and I still maintain this. Jonathan Marchessault was an impulse buy for the Nashville Predators. I think Nashville
Stamkos was too. I don't think Stamkos ever wanted to leave Tampa.
I don't think he did too. I can understand like prioritizing Steven Stamkos, but with Jonathan Marchessault, he was a guy that had been linked to a few other East Coast teams, namely the New Jersey Devils. It was almost put in writing that he was signing with the New Jersey Devils at noon that day. And then all of a sudden Nashville swooped in and offered him a contract that he just couldn't refuse. Same thing with Brady Shea getting a 7x7. But just I think these are moves that are ultimately going to hurt Nashville down the line. And it's unfortunate to see because I really liked their game last year. And Roman Josi isn't getting any younger. Roman Josi, who is injured at the moment, I think he's on IR. He's not getting any younger, and he's going to be 35. So you want to try to fit in his window, honestly. It also confused me why they picked up Michael Bunting. Ultimately, I thought that was kind of a head-scratching move for me, but neither here nor there. Those are my thoughts on winners and losers, and so is Tom's thoughts on winners and losers. The question I'm going to ask here, though, which we'll call this our question of the day to round things out here, Tom. And I put a little message here, thinking a famous quote here: playoffs. What team after the deadline looks more in a playoff position than they were pre-deadline?
I mean, the thing is that the teams who were shoo-ins made the big moves, whether it was Florida or Tampa or Toronto or Dallas. I mean, they all were pretty much there. They all got better, but they all got better, but I don't know if one particularly moved the needle over the other, is what I'm saying. If I had to pick one, I think it was Tampa who got better bolstering that third and fourth line. I look at Tampa now, and I think they may be my favorite coming out of the East. Like I said about Dallas, I don't know if they have that game breaker. Like I said about Florida, Vegas tried doing the same thing last year, bringing in guys on IR and throwing them out there in the playoffs and hoping it would work, and it didn't work. So if I had to pick one who's more equipped now to go further, I would have to say Tampa.
I'll agree and say that Tampa, I think, looks a lot stronger post deadline, that now they are almost a bona fide playoff team going into April. But the team to me that really made the jump of like, okay, now it really seems possible that you're going to win a cup, the Florida Panthers. I thought picking up Brad Marchand and Seth Jones really puts them in that category of like, okay, now we could have another Florida team repeat here.
But everybody said the same thing about Hurdle last year in Vegas. And I mean, they kept Hurdle long term, which was their goal. They only played 7 games last year against Dallas and lost. And the thing with Marchand is, myself and a lot of others included, I don't think he's staying in Florida. I don't.
But I think the big difference here, and at least in my mind, is two things that helps in Florida's favor. Number one, I think your defense is stronger than Vegas's was last year. That's number one. Number two, I think the goaltending is far and away stronger in Florida than it was in Vegas last year with Aiden Hill between the pipes. Um, Sergei Bobrovsky is having a career renaissance, and he is another main reason why Florida at the moment is potentially favored to possibly repeat at this point. You couple that with the fact that you're going to be getting Matt Tkachuk back fresh, fully rested. You're going to be getting Brad Marchand into this lineup as well, playing alongside Sam Bennett and Matt Tkachuk, as I mentioned before. But you also keep this top line intact of Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov, and Sam Reinhart, who also have been playing great hockey as of late. And they've got the support and they've got the role players. The one X factor here for Florida, in my mind, of like, okay, it could be teeter either which way now, is missing Aaron Ekblad. And we've got to still figure out, like, I actually need to figure out for myself if Aaron Ekblad is technically eligible for the playoffs with this 20-game suspension.
20 games, so, and I think they have just about that much left. So I don't think it's going to I don't think it's going to hinder anything, but at the same time, you're bringing a lot of players back into the playoffs potentially to play your in-state rival who's going to be chomping at the bit and whose guys have been playing together in round one. And that's the thing. And if I were them, they got to try and win the division.
Yeah. For me, though, for my money, I would say that Florida made a few moves that really inches them closer to Stanley Cup contention. On the Western side of things, I think Colorado made the moves that really kind of separate the men from the boys as well. That center depth is now all of a sudden a strong suit for them.
I like that too, but like I said, throughout history, Dallas has been their kryptonite, and they're on a one-way collision course with Dallas right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And Rantanen, I guarantee, is going to be chomping at the bit to play them in round one.
And that's going to be money hockey to watch as well. If they end up playing each other in round one, that is can't miss hockey for sure. But either way, Tom, overall thoughts from this deadline? Did you like this trade deadline?
I mean, I liked it. The way it's been lately, and now it's turning more. It's turning into a league now where teams are starting to build through making trades again instead of trying to get your core pieces in the draft. So now the last couple of years, and especially last year and this year, and even the year before, even though more of those guys were rentals, you're starting to see teams make these bigger moves now. Maybe with the cap coming up with third teams, bro. So it's gotten better over the years. We haven't had a dull one in the last 3 years. I say that this one was pretty good. Like I said, I think we all knew what was going to happen with Rantanen. That was a given. Marchand was a surprise. That was a big, big surprise, Marchand. And what was maybe even a bigger surprise is that another team who I forgot to mention my losers, and I'm just going to be real brief, Vancouver holding on to Brock Besser. There were a lot of teams who were in on him. Carolina was hot in on Besser, and they couldn't seem to get anything done. And I don't know what Vancouver's MO is. Do they think they have a shot at keeping him? Because I'm going to tell you right now, in my mind, I don't think Brock Besser is sticking around.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I thought I really liked this deadline in general, but I think we're starting to see a trend overall of like the bigger trades really happening in the lead up to the deadline instead of on deadline day. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I think you definitely have some teams that are starting to recognize that you need to get in before the buzzer to make the real differences in your lineup because the price really goes up on trade deadline day for sure. But as usual, guys, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of your favorite team and the moves that they made or did not make? Let us know, sound off down below, and hit the like button if you like our content as well. And make sure you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on i80 Sports. Hit the bell notifications so that way you guys know when our content goes live as well. But it's enough of us yapping. Time to watch some more hockey as we barrel through to the playoffs. Tom and I will be back very soon talking about teams in the lead up to the playoffs, as well as news that will be breaking as we get closer and closer to the NHL playoffs. But as usual, until then, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been Trade Deadline Winners and Losers on NHL on i80 Sports.